we were trying to do a couple of things, one of which was to introduce kinhin in on these times when we're having the longer sits, and also introduce a little more of the formality that would occur where we're sitting in a zendo. As since at some point, hopefully this fall, we'll be in a zendo and doing a retreat, and it'll be nice to have some familiarity with the customs thereof. So much of what we did this morning, A, we're doing for the first time, and B, we're doing for the first time in this online environment. And I have muscle memory that functions in the Zendo. When I'm here, my muscle memory, so even I don't exactly know what's going on or what comes next because, this is different. Anyway, so that said, as a Zen teacher, I love chaos. In Zen, we spend a lot of time being very, very orderly, and we do things in precise timing, and we follow certain ritual scripts, and we have certain liturgy, and so on and so forth. How many of you have a life that functions that way? I don't know about all you all, but I get up in the morning. I'm lucky if I get to drink my coffee before things start happening that I could not have predicted. And we adjust. That's what life is about. That's what Zen is about. In fact, I want this thing to go away. This thing got to go. I have this little notice about the recording. There, I got rid of it. Thank you. Okay. So, if we were doing Rinzai Zen, and we do this, we do a homogenization, to be clear, if you haven't, Maizumi Roshi had Soto transmission as his primary lineage. He also had Inca, which is sort of I don't know how to, it doesn't have really a good English, but an acknowledgement of being an adept in the Rinzai tradition because he had completed koan study and he was empowered to teach koans, which he did in this lineage. So we're a hybrid of a Soto lineage and we also do koans. But if we were doing Rinzai Zen, we'd only be doing koans. And you wouldn't get your koan in advance. You walk in the Dizang room, you sit down, and the teacher says, your koan today is, and you have to respond instantly. And in the old days, if you didn't respond instantly, you got whacked. No, I don't. And anyway, and I find that interesting, because I don't create a hierarchy around these things. The method that we follow is sort of the Soto method of doing Rinzai koans, which is you get your koan in advance and you spend time and you contemplate it as part of your zazen. And then you present your response when you come to Dizang. And it's kind of a hybrid. But the Rinzai thing, what the Rinzai thing does is cultivates an immediate non-intellectual response. Right? Here you are. Teacher eats koan, boom, you've got to respond. No time to think, no time to evaluate, whatever. Bam, respond. In a certain sense, how much is that like our life? You go to work and you walk in and the boss says, come in my office right now. I'd like to know why you did this. And you can't say, well, I'm going to go home and contemplate my response for a week and meditate on it. And then I'm going to come back in and I'll give you an answer, right? We answer right then and there. That's how life functions by and large. So that Rinzai approach, in a certain sense, I don't think you can go as deeply into the koans. I don't think, I think in using this kind of quasi Soto method, we're able to go very deep with the koan. We're able to really contemplate it, chew it over, and become very intimate with it, which I like because I'm biased, having that's the way I did it. But the Rinzai method has something to be said for it too, because it encourages that spontaneity. It encourages that ability to respond. And again, I think when we're out in the world living our lives, that's more often than not the skill that we need. Anyway, so therefore, I love a little bit of chaos. It takes us off the script. It makes us a little uncomfortable, uncertain. Well, guess what? Life makes us uncomfortable and uncertain. If there's a script for life, I haven't seen it. If any of you have it, please put it in an email to me. But like a JPEG file or something. But anyway, that said, I don't have it, right? Life just happens. This is, I mean, this is a concrete example. I don't know if you could see this. Every day, more or less every day, I do a list of my chores and things that I'm going to do for the day. This is my list. It happens to be on my computer here from Friday. I think I've completed 1/3 of the things that I was going to complete on Friday. Right? Because between Friday and now, all sorts of things have happened that I couldn't possibly have anticipated, including the fact that it's now snowing again. Just started in the last, whatever, 15 minutes here. And we're gonna that's this day. It's going to be snow, and it's also going to be sleet, and it's also going to be freezing rain, and it's going to be rain. Hello, no script. So an important part of what we're cultivating in our Zen practice is the ability to respond. To respond directly. If you come in and you present a koan to me and you give me an intellectual answer, you're not going to pass. You've got to find a direct response. You've got to find a straight path in. Okay, same thing. So I love a little bit of chaos is a good thing because it resembles the rest of our lives, right? And we have to adapt. And we do the best we can, and we make mistakes. And guess what? We make mistakes. Yes, we all make mistakes. Part of this thing, part of Zen, is being comfortable with our mistakes. There's an old expression that the life of a Buddha can be one continuous mistake. We can get the mistaken idea that Zen is about doing everything right. No, Zen is not about doing everything right. It's about doing everything with our whole body and mind, doing everything wholeheartedly, and not getting lost in the forest of intellectualization, complexity of thought. So anyway, we'll continue to work on this. When we have these little monthly sits, we'll work on the formalities surrounding the kinhin and Dharma talks and so on, and hopefully by the time we get together, if we do physically this fall, we'll have a sort of sense of where we're going. Okay. Enough of that. Here, on with the talk. So I'm going to start my talk with a koan this morning. Often one of my favorite koan. I know somebody has said, well, you say every time you talk about a koan, you say it's one of your favorites. It's true. But this one is a favorite. Anyway, it's called Dizang Planting the Fields. Very seasonal koan. It's kind of, well, we're not up to planting here in Maine quite yet, but it's coming. Dizang asked Suishan, where did you come from? Suishan said, from the south. Dizang said, "How is Buddhism in the South these days?" Suishan said, "There's extensive discussion." Dizang said, "How can that compare to me here planting the fields and making rice to eat?" Suishan said, "What can you do about the world?" Dizang said, "What do you call the world?" There could not be, I think, a koan with more contemporary relevance than this koan. Dizang asked Suishan, "Where do you come from?" Suishan said, "From the south." Dizang said, "How is the resistance going in the south these days?" Suishan said, "We are protesting outside of Tesla showrooms." Dizang said, "How can that compare to me here planting the fields and making rice to eat?" Suishan, "What can you do about the world?" Dizang said, "What do you call the world?" So interestingly enough, some of these, at least this for me, and perhaps for others as well, is a really important and burning question. How do I respond to these times? How do I respond to what's happening in our country? How do I respond to the great cruelty, inhumanity, and even death that is happening? How do I respond as a person, as a human being, as a Zen Buddhist, as a Buddhist teacher, on and on and on ad infinitum? And personally, I'm struggling with that. Part of me sees Zwishan's side, not having discussions. That's not not on the table. But that the side that wants to be activist, the side that wants to go to demonstrations, the side that wants to hold up signs, whatever. And then there's the sign that says, "No, I need to work." And I see this a lot. I see this dichotomy every day with my friends online. Because I was for several years very active in the Poor People's Campaign here in Maine. So I have actually many, many friends who have come from that sort of more um, political activism side, I'll say, for lack of a better word. And I have many friends from spiritual traditions, and they're and I have many friends that are clergy, and so I'm seeing a whole different set of responses. And so this came up in my life yesterday, just yesterday. It was like they were having a major presence at the Tesla charging stations. We don't have a dealer here in Waterville. And many of my poor people campaign friends and acquaintances were going there to make their presence known. And I wrestled with it for quite some time because I also kind of looked at some other people who were saying, we've got to be so cautious not to lose our spiritual center. We got to be so cautious not to become part of the division, part of the anger, part of the frustration, part of the hatred. Kind of hard to argue with that. So, where are the lines? I don't know. I didn't end up going, and I felt pulled the other way. If it were to happen again today, I might make a different decision. I think the Dharma is pretty clear on this point. The Dharma is clearly biased in favor of loving kindness, right? Compassion and manifesting those. But how do we manifest those, and where do we manifest those, and when do we manifest those? And I don't have I have questions and I don't have good answers. Because I think these are such challenging times, unprecedented in my life, which has been quite long at this point. And I have no guideposts. I mean, beyond what I just said, beyond the Dharma. But could I bear witness at a demonstration and be manifesting loving kindness and compassion? Yeah, I presume that's possible, more than possible. I think there are people who are doing that. There are people who are very good at it, Quakers and others who really know how to bring a compassionate presence into a complex and often antagonistic situation. Christians, when there were still Christians who were really Christians and not Christian nationalists who were coming out manifesting loving kindness and what they saw as the teachings of Jesus, right? So again, for me, very hard. So we have the Zen peacemaker order model, which we're well familiar with, right? Someone just brought that up to me the other day. Oh, I had an occasion on Friday meeting there's a new rabbi down in Rockland, and he and I had coffee together, and turns out he was well acquainted with Bernie Glassman and Bernie's teachings and the Zen peacemaker model. He's a very cool guy, actually, and we were talking about that. So we have that here also. What does it say? It says not knowing. Well, I'm being really good at that right now. I got it. Not knowing in these situations, we don't have we don't have preconceptions. We don't, as best we can, not have biases, and we don't have answers. Right? In terms of that model, that's a pretty good place to be. Head scratching, kind of like not knowing. And then bearing witness. Now that's interesting because how do we bear witness? Some people say, well, I'm not watching the news or I'm not listening to the news because I don't want to see these horrible things going on. Is that bearing witness? Does watching a half hour news a day, is that bearing witness? Is, kind of at what point do we go from ignoring or not paying attention to where we're bearing witness? In the bearing witness retreats that ZPO holds, it's very concrete. It's very intimate. They're about to go to South Dakota to the Lakota reservation, and so that how do you bear witness to the treatment of indigenous Americans? And how they do it is they go right there. They're right there and they talk with people. All right, they talk with all the people that are affected by it and get in and learn about their direct experience. And that's what they do in any context. When Bernie first started these, one of the first ones he started was the Bearing Witness Retreat at Auschwitz. And what they did was invited people from all the parties that had been affected by the Holocaust, including Germans. They had Germans, they had Jews, they had Gypsies, they had Poles, so on and so forth, all the impacted groups to be able to come and bring their experience and also their contribution to the healing of the whole. It's hard to heal these things when all the parties are not at the table. So that's a powerful and, in our tradition, a conspicuous model that's present. But how do we apply that to present day situations? How and what, the not knowing might be the easiest part, although that's got its own complexity in terms of not bringing our prejudices, bringing our preconceptions, bringing our fears, bringing our anger, all of those things in. So to not know, truly, we've got to let all of those things go. We've got to become tabula rasa, right? We've got to become a clean slate. A fresh start in the moment, right there. And if we were doing it in the sense that Bernie does it, then we'd probably have some kind of a retreat or a get together, and we'd invite people who voted for Trump, and we'd invite technocrats who think Elon Musk is doing a great job, and then we'd invite, people from the other segments of our society that are very upset right now. We'd have immigrants that are facing being thrown out of the country. Um, and we'd have LGBTQ people who are, facing renewed discrimination, and transsexuals who are fearing for their lives. And we bring all that together, and we'd somehow have some kind of a furnace where we shared our perspective and shared our views and shared our humanity, and maybe we would come out with some kind of a common understanding. But we can't do that. I mean, as a practical matter, assembling that would be pretty near to impossible. Or at least for those of us who are just kind of in our lives here. We're not, I'm going to have to get up tomorrow and I'm going to have to make decisions based on what I have. I can't say, okay, well, I'm going to get in all these people from all these groups to help me make these decisions. I've got to function. And do I respond? Do I not respond? How do I respond? How much do I respond? And I hope that some of you are experiencing these same kinds of questions. This is such an unprecedented time. This is not about elections. This is not about Democrats versus, so really, we're going to come back in 26 or whatever. This is about whether we have a democracy in 26 or not, whether we hold together as a country, whether we don't have a civil war. Really profound issues that are going to play out in the next couple of years. And do we respond? And how do we respond? It's at once very personal, but I think it's critically important. And where we come out, some people may come out on the side of Dizang and say, "Well, I'm going to plant my garden this spring because that's how I'm going to respond. That's how I'm going to help. I'm going to grow food for the community." That's a perfectly defensible response. And other people might say they're headed to the Tesla show. We don't know. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and invite thoughts, comments, responses, etc.
One
Oh,
thing,
Peter, I just want to say I had love the chaos too. I don't thrive in it. Actually, that's a lie. I do. I came from a family with 8 kids, so I know what chaos is. So I can surf it pretty good. But thank you for the technology and thank you guys for being here for this sit. I mean, this is really awesome for me personally. And I don't know anything about anything else, but I like the sitting today. So thanks.
one thing that strikes me about the kinds of things you were talking about, Peter, is, we to take a side is the result of thinking, and we could decide we're against Elon Musk, or we could decide we're for Elon Musk. And if we're letting go of thoughts, you know, uh, it, I, I don't know. It's just there's just kind of a dichotomy there, um, because all that action, I think, depends on thoughts plus compassion. But sometimes I guess somebody like Trump or Musk might argue that sometimes short-term pain leads to longer-term good. So uh, I don't think he's right, but that's my thought. In these cases. So I don't know. It's just that to me is part of the complexity of the current situation.
Um, Peter, I think you raised such an important topic. Um, the day of the election, or whenever we got the results, I remember thinking, uh, I want to make sure that I do not engage in actions that are divisive. And yet, now here we are, a few months later, and there are so many injustices and uh, tragedies occurring to some of our fellow citizens that it calls for action, and I want to do that action. Um, there's a little bit of an analogy in here for me between the situation we're in and climate change. And with climate change, we hear renewable energy, uh, and the one thing that I hardly ever hear is conservation. Do with less. Don't don't just look to recycle everything. Reuse it, or there's so little emphasis put on um, how to how to do with less. I mean, Jimmy Carter tried to do that, and he didn't get very far in his presidency. So I see what's going on now as kind of similar, that um, there's this side and there's that side. And I know that there is so much common ground among both sides. Maybe, I'm not sure about Trump and Musk. They're um, beyond my comprehension, but I do comprehend that there are people in this country who are hurting so badly, who live paycheck to paycheck, who are isolated, who are unhappy, and who are kind of willing to let the government go because it just hasn't worked for them. And um, and as I prepare my signs and do what I think needs to be done to fight the overthrow of the government and fight injustice, I'm very much aware of the fact that it does set up two sides. You know, some people ride by and wave, and others ride by and shoot a bird, and there's so little talk about the common interests of all of us. And I guess that's by design because power is much more easily concentrated when groups are divided. Um, so I don't have an answer either, but it is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and it's just very sad that we don't look for the common ground, or that we don't look for how can we do with less rather than figure out ways to keep our same level of comfort. Um, so thank you for raising it. Causes me to think a little more about it.
It's interesting. As we're talking, I was thinking, about the Zen Peacemaker Order, and they've had a couple of retreats. Well, one coming up that I mentioned, the Standing Rock Reservation one that's coming on Lakota. And I think they just had or are having one in Alabama and Birmingham, bearing witness to racism and meeting with some of the people who were involved in the Bloody Sunday on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and in the civil rights movement and so on and so forth. Why aren't they having a America 2025 bearing witness? Why are they going out to these other contexts rather than facing what we're facing right in our context of our lives right now? mean, that's a rhetorical question, but it just occurred to me. It's like, oh yeah, maybe it's a lot easier to go to distant places and distant times than it is to face what's happening right in our own backyards.
Yes, exactly. I think about the Zen peacemakers and going to Auschwitz, and we hear how so much that's taking place now is what took place then. So, what would the Zen peacemakers have done uh, as the Nazis were gaining power? You know, at the front of the event rather than at the back of the event.
It's a good question. I think it's very good because it's as you're saying that, I'm thinking it's really a model that responds after the fact, not at the fact or before the fact.
Right.
One, we know that when people are being bullied, right, that the best thing you can do is kind of just intercede. You don't necessarily have to take the punch, but you just kind of walk into the situation and kind of disrupt it just a little. You just say hi and kind of see if you can walk the person out of the situation. So I think by opening our hearts and being there with the people, as Peter said, you may not be in the mix holding the sign, but you can also, I don't know, just be aware, bring that awareness, and just be the you that you are and do what you can in every given moment. As you said, it's total chaos anyway. What the fuck, right?
So this is a very apropos talk we're having, and this morning, and of course it's something that I give a lot of thought to. Um, I don't even really have concrete answers. I don't have concrete answers. I only know that how can I not protest people being taken off the streets and taken away? I'm just thinking of the big stories, the Venezuelan, the college students, the woman being taken off the street, with people with masks. That's the I know this is not the beginning of it, but this really is the outward appearance of, you know, all the terror campaigns in the world. Uh, People not having rights, people that are here legally. Even forget all that legally, illegally, or whatever. I'm only saying when we talk about, okay, so we talk about, where were the Zen peacemakers before Auschwitz? Where was the recognition from? Uh, I don't even know what to say about this, but it was happening and it kept happening. And look where that ended up. And it's been happening and happening over again, over and over again. And now it's happening right here. It's, there's a lot of bad things that are going on, but for me, I mean, there's a lot. Oh, there is that word, good, bad, whatever. Disturbing things that are disturbing to me and to thousands of other people going on. Um, I don't know. I don't even know how to participate in the protest. I mean, I'll go next weekend. All the state capitals are having protests against what's going on. And I will go because I've been to protests that were very peaceful. And it helps me to, I mean, I appreciate being there with people who are terribly distressed by our rights, the rights of people, not me necessarily, not white America, me, but so many of our brothers and sisters. It's so many sentient beings, really, or whatever. The people in Greenland, it's just overwhelming. I feel like we have to get out in the streets. That's for me. I feel like I have to get out in the streets. Thank you.
As someone who was demonstrating yesterday on a street corner near a Tesla place, I have the feeling I was there for all of those people who are going to lose their food banks, who are going to lose all their businesses because there will be no money coming through the federal government to pay for their goods. And I realize that I'm not talking to the people who are making these decisions, but I just felt I had to do something. And that was something I could do, but I was also very aware of the fact that I was surrounded by people who are like-minded. So there was no effort there to find common ground. But I am one of the privileged, and I really felt I was there for all of those who are going to be struggling even more very soon, if not right now.
I have felt a lot of camaraderie with fellow protesters, but I look around and most of them are old ladies like me. So, of course, I feel comfortable with them.
I saw a lot of young people, families with children and dogs. Yeah,
That's really good,
quite a
good to hear.
quite a variety. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as the crowds grow, that will happen. But
Yeah.
it's been a little discouraging not to see youth out there.
Well, the talk today kind of pits me against myself, and probably it happens to all of us. But the one part of myself that I rather like is the internal one that nurtures a spirit and is somewhat withdrawn and and finds strength in that, nurturing that. I've never liked to protest, never liked to be out on the street. I don't like aggression, and I don't like my own aggression, almost in any way. Um, And one of the solutions here is what Molly said, is being yourself, and inserting yourself in a situation can be helpful. We all, the Christians and many people, and I suppose I'm one of them, think that there is some good that comes out of Cistercians who are withdrawn in the Alps. It's good to know they're there contemplating and then praying for everyone and being spiritual. At least the knowledge of that tells me that that is part of humanity, and that that is a good thing. And there's another part of me that said, does that really help? Then says in a way that it does. Be that person. It's part of your world and it can help. But as I was listening to all of this and I was listening to Kathy talk, there was a dog bark. And I thought the dog bark was in cue. There comes a time at which there's a point at which you can't go on being me and reserved and back. I suppose it's a matter of degree of seeing how egregious it is to our fellow human beings. But um, uh, I don't think I have any choice but to engage in what I'm seeing here. It's hard to modulate that, for me, but I am starting to call, make the calls, make a voice, and be engaged, kicking and screaming. I don't want to do this, but um, I'm not exactly in conflict with myself, I guess. And so I guess in one way I am. I resist doing this, but I think I have to. It's not where I want to be. Maybe this is a chaos that kicks me in the derriere and says, well, that's what you're handed. And if we're on target today, that's Zen. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but I find, that as with all of us, I think the two sides are kind of trying to figure this out and when to react or to react. But it's the basic conundrum of the koan.
So concretize it in the context of the koan for a minute. Is Dizang right or wrong to be home plowing his fields in response to what's going on in the world?
Well, if you're asking me that, the definition of a dilemma is that you have two right answers and two wrong answers. So that no, it's not wrong, and yes, it's wrong. Uh, I hate to use words like depending on how you look at it, but personally, I don't think it's wrong. But I was trying to get at that just for me, there's a threshold, I guess, and that's what we're all debating. It sounded like you were doing the same, Peter. There's a point at which you have to move out, and I guess that varies for all of us. I've found my own anyway. Maybe I'm not answering this well, but I can't say he's doing it wrong. It would seem his heart is in the right place.
Well, uh, if people aren't plowing the fields and planting, then nothing will happen. We won't eat. That's where, you know, it is. It's an individual thing, what you can and can't do. But, if he doesn't plow his fields, we're not going to eat. So, my life is different. I'm not planting fields to feed people. If I was, then I think that would be the thing I would be doing. But that isn't me. So I have to find, I think as you said, Cal, we each have to find our point where, um, you know, or whether or not you find your point or not. I mean, for me, I express my point. I believe you're starting to express your point, maybe that it is time to move out a little more. So, mhm.
Taking the planning fields a little literally, take it metaphorically. What if we said Dizang is going to the nursing home to talk with people who are convalescing, or Dizang is spending time playing with children who are orphaned, or something like that. Um, would that change the dynamic?
So for me, the simple striking terror of this is that it's a universal lack of compassion. Half the country, so to speak, again, we could mince words and calculate, um, is in the position of this is unacceptable and fuck you. I'm just speaking very loosely, but lack of compassion. And this has been the human story, at least as far as written story is for humanity. And methods for cultivating a growth of compassion in this human organism, to me, seems like the only way to get beyond this and beating each other up and fighting and yelling and screaming. However, I come from a Holocaust background, and the only reason I'm here is because some people had mercy on some people in the microenvironment of saving some lives, and here I am. So I get that getting out in the streets and yelling is really life-saving, but the meta life save is the human condition of scarcity and greed, anger, and ignorance, and all the things that we sit with. Um, and that's where the field comes in for me. That's the only real, I mean, otherwise it's just a repeating pattern over and over and over for millennia. This is how we've been. We're in a new emerging dark ages now. We've been there before and before and before. This is not new.
Distressing to me this morning was the Portland Press Herald reporting that Republicans in Maine, prior to right now, were 98% approval of what Trump has done. They are now 96% approving. They are overwhelmingly approving. There's a world out there that I just totally don't understand. And they don't understand me. And it's really, really terrifying. The best I can do is try to listen. Susan talked about people who have tried so hard and gotten nowhere and reached the point of just burn the whole thing down because they have nothing to lose, they think. But their grandmother may be in a nursing home that is going to lose Medicaid. And then what? Or a cousin may be snatched off the street by someone who's masked. How do we convey that kind of potential and not be high and mighty and nose in the air and not caring? I'm with Deborah. This kind of thing has happened over and over in the same kind of patterns. And it's really, really scary to me.
Well, and I would say also that since the pain that these folks are inflicting by insisting that I need more money, I don't know what the hell they need. Anyway, they need something that they don't have and they're angry about it and they're pissed and they're gonna take back the country and blah blah blah. Um, at taking back, right? Something's been denied to them and they want to take it back. That comes from a real hole in their self. And it is there. It happens all the time. Right now, that big gaping hole is just sucking in all the energy of the universe. But again, I don't see that fighting fire with fire, as it were, helps. Again, I think it's one on one, doing the best you can, giving your life if you have to. There's just no right and wrong. We're all going to be in these situations where we come up against it, and you're going to be in the mix. It's shit's going to hit the fan, and you just gotta go with your heart and do what you think is best in any given moment. You're not going to save the world. You're not going to oust Trump. You're not going to cut off Elon Musk's head. You're not going to kill JD Vance or make him disappear. This shit's here. It's going to be here. It's real. And you can only do what you can do in any given moment.
Molly, if I may, thank you for saying that because I feel a little bit, I don't know, I'm of that mentality of I respect if you feel you need to go demonstrate and you need to go, I don't know how else to say it, but go big. I am go small. I think it's about doing what you can and being open to what is happening, doing what you can within that context. To me, is the small, is picking up the phone or having a conversation with someone who is of complete different mindset or beliefs or whatever, and not immediately closing up because you support this or that and I don't. It is just listening, trying to listen. Maybe there's a little bit of truth or something that we can agree on. Maybe it's just not closing up. I don't know. It's again, if you're gonna go to demonstrate, not being angry at everybody that does not agree or being on opposite sides. Just, I don't know, just start small. I think Susan, you mentioned the recycling with the do what you can, you know, maybe just I don't know, start where you are. I think there's a phrase, something like that. Be mindful of your words and your actions at your level. If that's all you can do, that's all you can feel comfortable with, that's okay. I think that has the chance of actually making a big difference if enough people do it. So I don't know, that's kind of my small way of trying everything I can. And then Molly, on a separate note with the chaos. So I am a single child. I'm a one child, you know, and I do not handle chaos. That is the most, so this has been a learning experience, but I have to admit it has it's been, I don't want to say fun, but it's just been a very different and liberating thing because normally I would have been completely tight and stressed out. And at some point I just went, you know what? It's worked out just fine. So thank you to everybody who has been part of this particular journey. It's been very interesting. And Peter, thank you for helping with that as well.
Yeah, and when I was in graduate school, we had an expression, another fucking growth experience. So just because we have them doesn't mean we enjoy them.
I'll have to steal that.
No, and I appreciate very much this discussion and what everybody's saying. And as I see it, there's no right and wrong here. This is a very personal existential choice that we that we have in front of us in these times. So I'll share one other little Zen story here. Those of you who've done the koan Tokusan carries his bowl will remember that there are two monks in that story, Ganto and Seppo, who were among Tokusan's successors. Well, at some point down the road, a group of bandits showed up at the monastery. And in those days, bandits, I mean, they were bad guys, right? They killed people and so on. Anyway, so the bandits were on the way, and the announcement happened at the monastery: the bandits are coming. So Ganto ran away. Seppo stayed. And when the bandits arrived, the head bandit went up to Seppo and said, "Who are you?" And Seppo gave a great Zen shout. So the bandit cut his head off. Ganto went on to have a long lineage. So who. Okay, let's end our discussion here.